Lending Era, the podcast where we dive into the world of residential, business and commercial lending, bringing you expert insight, tips and strategies to help you navigate the intricate landscape of lending in Australia. I'm one of your hosts, Jessica, and joining me today we have Trilogy Funding's Managing Director, David Thomas.
Hey Jess, how are you?
I'm good, Dave. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well, very well. So nice and sunny outside. So
It is.
I'm happy.
And sitting just to my right, we have a very special guest joining us today. As well as being a longtime friend of our Managing Director, David, our guest is one of Canberra's most celebrated real estate agents with over 10 years in the industry, over 700 sales locally. Wow, what a big number. I can't comprehend that. And not to mention a new suburb record every other weekend. I'm very pleased to announce that we have here joining us today, Anthony McCormack.
Thank you for having me along.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no, we're really happy to have you here. So, I think it's we've been chatting for a little bit, Jess and I, in regards to putting together the podcast and bringing in some guests. And we want to make sure that the guests were of the right, quality and calibre, and you definitely tick all the boxes for that. So.
Oh, thank you. I feel very privileged.
This is a quality over quantity kind of operation here. And look, today we're going to be tackling a process which is often enough. It's something that I know I would get quite overwhelmed with, and we see a lot of clients both in the finance and the realtor side of the things getting a little bit overwhelmed with, and that is the idea of selling your property. All of the wheels that are turning simultaneously, the panic attacks that are kind of happening in the background, and we just need to kind of break that down for a client and make it as user-friendly as possible.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I think, buying and, selling and buying a property or your home, you don't do it every day. You're lucky to do it every 5 years, maybe 10, maybe 15, maybe 20, right? So, when do I need to talk to the broker? When do I need to talk to the agent? When do I need to talk to a lawyer? What's the sequence of events? And that's what we're just going to run through today.
Beautiful.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, as a little introduction here, Anthony, I would like to ask you how you first got into the real estate world all those years ago, by the sounds, over 700 open homes ago.
Yeah, quite interesting. I'm originally a farmer from Crookwell, so it was in my blood to a degree. My grandfather was a stock and station agent and my uncle was a real estate agent, so I kind of had a bit of an idea and a background as to what was involved. But essentially we just got sick of the drought and wanted some supplementary income and came to Canberra with another business. That didn't go so well, so we got into real estate and really haven't looked back. Absolutely have loved it since I've got into it.
No, and it's definitely only been an upward trajectory from you since the start. I think that's very clear to say, and particularly now with the business that you're operating with Heyman Partners, definitely one of Canberra's most known brands, I would say. Yeah,
and you've had a trajectory through the industry. Like you've started kind of small and then built and built and built to get to where you currently are. To have a team behind you and to be doing the kind of sales numbers that you've been doing. Do you think that's has that evolved over time, like you've learnt the craft?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that I identified early was that I've had a really good coach for that whole period, and he's been able to direct me right through that growth. And obviously, there's a lot of hard work that goes in behind it and beside it, but essentially, just having that those timelines or time frames in your life where you get to a certain amount of sales and then you grow and then grow again and then putting the systems and processes in place behind that is what really allows you to sort of go out and do quite big numbers.
Yeah. So
setting yourself up to success with a plan. What is it? A failure to plan is planning to fail.
Correct.
One of the dad quotes that I hear almost every other day from Dave. Now, let's get through just kind of a list here of the process for selling your first home or your second home or however many homes you've had. I'm sure it's daunting and it never gets any easier. But how early on in the thought process of perhaps I'll sell my property would you urge a client to get in touch from a real estate perspective?
It's a very specific time. Some people get job relocations and have to move quite quickly.
Oh, yes.
Other people are looking to downsize, so they've got a longer, time frame in terms of how they approach getting ready to sell. So it's very different. It's very individual to each client. But generally, if you said to me today, I want to sell this property and be on the market before Christmas, roughly about 2 weeks to get ready. And then, of course, it's all the other things that go on around that in terms of the preparation with the contract, preparation of the property, getting it ready, whether you paint or do pre-sale works, and then all of those things sort of combine together, and then away you go.
And from a finance perspective, would you put a number on it?
Yeah, look, I would. I would say earlier the better. So, for some clients, it's like especially if they're self-employed, 6 months earlier to maybe 3 months earlier. Because I think the process really should be have a chat to your financier first, right? Work out what your math and numbers are. If you're thinking you're going to sell your property for $1 million and then, go and buy something for $2 million, go and talk about finances first and work out if those math and numbers are doable for you. And then that will enable you to get an idea on what your finances are. And then you can go and start chatting to your real estate agent, and you've got some numbers to work with. So, you can have those kind of open conversations of, hey, Anthony, I'm trying to sell this for $1 million. Is this going to happen? Yes or no? Am I dreaming or am I not dreaming?
Yeah.
So I think earlier the better.
And just in addition to that, it's really important to get a good, precise number early in that, because what you don't want to do is get a number that's, it's way too high or too low. You need to be very accurate around that. And that's where the trust of an experienced real estate agent comes into it, because you don't want to be given the wrong numbers, because it can create a hell of a mess at the end if you're told one figure and then it's not. So it's really important that your real estate agent identifies what you're trying to do in this situation. Yeah,
particularly that realistic price, like you've mentioned, because I know we all have our own intrinsic value for things, but you do need someone to kind of get in there and be the bad guy, because otherwise everyone else's work is kind of in vain. If it all falls apart 2 months before settlement or 2 days before settlement, even worse, we start to hit a few hiccups, and that's where you never want to sell a property again, because it's all too hard.
Definitely.
And what would you say the most important things are to consider when you're pricing a property up front for a client?
The important things are there is to be very accurate, again, as I mentioned, around what's sold that's comparable, and actually have those honest and upfront conversations early. So rather than, as I said, give an inflated price, let them or take them through the pricing with you. So they go, okay, well, this property was on 1,000 square metres. It was a 200 square metre home. It's a fit out that's pretty new. It's going to be priced at X.
Yeah.
So a way to break that down essentially is, as I said, by the comparable sales. But it's also a good formula that I use is a summation formula, which essentially is the land value plus the house plus the garage plus landscaping. So once you put those together and then cross-check them against each other, you come up with a very accurate pricing.
Yeah, and it's kind of hard to argue when you look at things like building replacement value and land value, because they're specific valuer comments as well. It's something you can buff up in that area.
Yeah. And as Anthony said before, look at the comparables, inferior or, is it your property superior or inferior to others? And then that'll help you gauge how buyers are going to be feeling about the property as well.
And in the current market, let's talk kind of the 2023 year as a whole, would you have a preferred sale method over auction or negotiation?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people ask this, and whether it's auction or for sale, we tend to use a different strategy.
Yeah.
I don't want to give away all my secrets, but
baseline secrets.
But in terms of getting someone sold and optimizing their sale price and to make it as risk free as possible, the contract and strategy that we put in place allows that. So we're trying to get a legally binding contract with competitive tension around the price, and then also to just make it easy for the client. What we found with taking that strategy actually takes the risk out of it or reduces the risk. Some contracts can be out in the marketplace for a long time when you get a lot of other people involved. But if you've got a good agent that can control the process, it makes it so much easier and so much less risky.
Yeah, and I think we've all seen the situations where a property has potentially changed hands from one agency to another, and you really do need to just go in with the expert in the area, with the reputation and the feedback from the community, to get it right the first time, because no one wants to be putting their life on hold.
Yeah, and it's, sometimes that selling agent and their control over the process can make the difference between, getting a sale happening within a reasonable period of time for the right amount of money and not really controlling the process and then, maybe missing potential buyers or, things taking too long. Sometimes I'll chat to clients and the client will say, the agent's being inflexible with what we want to do. And I'm like, yeah, but you own an Apple iPhone, right? Was that inflexible to purchase? Did you pay a high price for it? And did you wait for it because it was the right thing? So sometimes controlling the sales process, actually helps the seller.
Yeah.
And I think that quite often gets missed with buyers in the market, that their job is to help the seller and controlling that sales process and making it impartial and, potentially having an auction and, it's going to be on this date and, It's just a really clear process, and if it's controlled well, it'll get the right result.
Yeah, I think as well, not one size fits all. So
No, I can imagine.
we tend to really engage with the buyer if they're super emotional at the time and they want to buy it. So we engage a lot earlier so we don't just set and forget. So we don't just say we're going to auction or we're going for sale.
Yeah.
We actually watch very closely what the buyer pool is doing. We might have a standout buyer, at day 7, for example, as opposed to day 23 at auction. So if that standout buyer is there, we're actually engaging through that process, that strategy that I talked about.
Yeah, and on that engagement piece, actually, that flows into the next one. Something I know that your team do very well is the marketing and the digital marketing around a property. How important would you say the marketing campaign is to a property's success?
Yeah, it's a good question. And part of the marketing is not only that what you see. It's not only allhomesandrealestate.com and all those and the digital side of things. It's also the advice that you get when the agent goes to the house and says, we need to do this, this and this to shift, essentially to shift your property from live-in mode to sale mode. So it's really crucial that you get that advice. As Dave said a minute ago, if one of those pieces of the puzzle is not in, that can destroy the whole campaign and it can really extend your days on market. Yeah. So it's really important to have all of that marketing in place so that's accurate, it's cost effective, and you're going to get a return on that spend. So it's a huge part of what goes on.
And I think going back to the first piece in terms of when would you start, talking to someone if you wanted to sell, the earlier you get the ball rolling, the better your marketing campaign will generally be. Because we've seen some crackers out of Heyman Partners. I know there was one with a pink flamingo. And that is now a few months old, but it still lives rent-free in my mind, just this pink flamingo floaty in a pool. And that is effective marketing. And that would have sold that property because it's selling a vision of a lifestyle, not just the brick and mortar that it's built on.
Yeah. And most buyers are, especially in kind of the Heyman and Partners budget, where we've got, Woden, Inner South and Western Creek type areas, it's their lifestyle, that people are buying. They're buying, potentially a forever family home. And, what does that look like? And shots with kids in them running down corridors and, people swimming in pools and all that kind of stuff. I think that really kind of shows what your life's going to be like when you're there.
Yeah,
it certainly resonates with buyers, and that's why even styling as part of the marketing is a really important piece. If people can come to a home and actually see and feel how they can live in that home, that's what sells it.
It's an emotional attachment straight away, isn't it?
Exactly.
You're buying the idea of what you could do here, not the property itself. And that's where you can really kind of hit great success, I'd say.
And on that theming part, like obviously you've got people that you work with that come in and style and, are an extra set of eyes.
Yeah, we do. And look, our sort of offering as an agent is to pretty much project manage the whole thing from start to finish. So we have tradespeople on hand, so painters, handymen, gardeners, stylists, the whole package comes with what we do. So rather than say to the owner, here are the numbers, we actually take that over because we actually know what we want. So we get the quotes and then we actually supervise those works through to the end. And then that just, again, is that control piece around making sure that we've got exactly the right product to go to the market.
That is so valuable because I know that if an agent had given me a list of, say, several things that they wanted done to optimise sale, it would sit on my coffee table for 2 weeks while I pondered if it was even worth calling these people. So that there is a real value add.
Yeah. And quite often I would think you'd walk through a lot of homes and do a lot of appraisals and people wouldn't see what you see because they walk past it every day. Chips in tiles or, paint missing off doors or something like that.
It's spot on. People don't actually see what we see. They say, I didn't see that. I haven't noticed that. And away it goes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you do. You just become accustomed to it. It's just there.
It's just your house.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about something as well that I know that your team are exceptional at, and that is handling expectations of the sellers. So once a property has actually hit the market, how do you manage the people in this process and keep them calm? Because I know I would be very anxious.
It's a massive communication piece, and that starts right back at the first meeting.
Yeah.
Setting the expectations around price, from where the vendor wants to be and where the market is. And then it's done just through constant communication. My life is spent on the phone, really.
Yes, I can imagine your screen time.
So it's quite a lot of calls around what buyers are interested in the property, what buyers aren't. The ones that aren't, we put into a different kind of pool and go, well, they're not interested because of X, whereas the ones that are, we then sort of channel into a different spot. So we're actually helping them with the contract, getting them back on a private buyer inspection, all that kind of thing. So when we actually get to the point where the owner has to make a decision around a price or offer, they're in a really informed spot. So they know exactly who's come through. They might go, well, Dave's come through. He's got 2 kids. He's got a red car. He wants his kids to go to Alfred Deakin or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The fine detail that comes into why that buyer is interested in your property is what we then pass on to the owners. We've just found that takes a hell of a lot of guesswork out from
I can
rather
imagine.
than just run a campaign where sometimes some agents, and you've got to be careful here, but they don't know where their buyers are at.
No.
So it's really important to have a really good understanding of who's there and why they're there.
And I think it would be far easier, particularly in the market at the moment, to not get to know the buyers in that sense and just kind of look at the numbers. And that's the value add I'd say that you definitely add to this piece, is getting to know them, creating a relationship there. Because if this property isn't for them, how many more are you selling every year? You could still place them in their dream home down the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's part of how my career's progressed. Being able to place buyers in that pre-market exclusive campaign is really important, because some sellers don't want to go through open homes, and they don't want to have that. They're private, so they don't want to have that kind of marketing.
Yeah.
Whereas if we've got a good suite of buyers, 4 or 5 buyers that we know that we can take to their property and potentially buy it, it just creates a whole different experience for them.
Yeah, and off-market listings, they're very popular at the moment. I've seen quite a few that get reported.
Yeah. So, well, I've seen a few pop up on the, Heyman & Partners Instagram feed of being off-market transactions. So I suppose that's just, you appraising things and just having an ear to the ground. Is that how they usually come about?
Yeah, it's also knowing the buyers and when they're ready. We talk to you a lot about financings and when they're financed and ready to go, and that buyer becomes at a different level to someone who's only just beginning the journey. So if they've missed out on a property at auction or they've made offers and missed, they're at a different level compared to the rest of the buyer pool. So they're the buyer pool, and that communication point is there. So we know exactly where they're at, we know where their budget's at, we know what they want, and then we just channel them into that property.
Yeah, you find them something.
And you are right about the they become in a different buyer pool. We had a client that drove to an auction on Saturday before last, missed out, drove straight to another property and had purchased within 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, that is a different buyer, right? To someone who's just starting the
completely
the process.
heartbroken from the first property and then just gunned into the second.
Yeah, and a multi-million-dollar property purchase. So not to be taken lightly, but they knew, like, they were at that point. They were ready to make a decision.
Yeah. Now let's run through a small little timeline here. Now this is where we get into definitely the real estate agent perspective for the timeline, and then the finance side of things more specifically. So we've already covered the thoughts of selling, so downsizing, upgrading, relocating. We've agreed that the mortgage broker as early as possible to run the numbers, because, if there's only affordability for a $100,000 loan, probably not the time to sell.
Yeah.
Probably we can all agree on that. And then likewise, getting in early with a reputable real estate agent to try and see where your property sits is just as valuable, I'd say, if not more valuable, to make sure your numbers are correct.
Yeah, and as Anthony was saying just before, like, preparing the property for market, taking the time to do all of those little jobs around the house, so it looks its best and looks its best in the marketing, and that'll, hopefully bring the most amount of people through the front door.
Yeah, definitely. And further to that, I think it's actually having that professional opinion of what to do and what not to do.
Yes.
So some people are a little bit confused about what to spend money on and what not to spend money on, and we're very what we do is usually quite superficial. So where we get the best return is paint, flooring and styling, and having those things done, again, achieves that best result. But we're unless you're going to stay in the property, if it's a really long lead time of 5 years plus, we're not touching big cost items like kitchens and bathrooms and things like that.
Because the new buyer could potentially hate the colour green.
Yeah.
And then you've just put a lime green backsplash, There's too many variables in that way. And in another item of preparing a property, at what point would you generally recommend a client to engage a solicitor or conveyancer? Would that be during the same time they're doing those repairs, or would that be later on in the piece?
Yeah, similar timing. It's really all of those things kind of work in line with each other. Once they've spoken to their financier, their agent, again, the agent usually takes control of that and helps them either find a solicitor or they've got a previous relationship with the solicitor.
Yeah.
So at that time of engagement with the agent is usually when the solicitor is introduced and prepares the contract, etc.
Yeah, brilliant. And why all of these repairs, or we'll just say why the property is being prepared for market, at that point that is generally where David would step in and get all of the approvals in place.
Correct. So we've probably we definitely have done the math and numbers, and we've done all the calculations. It's not essentially at that very first stage that we go and get approvals in place. Reason being, approvals only going to last so long.
Yes.
And this could be a long lead time. No point getting pre-approvals if you're not going to go to market for the next 90 days. So once the property is getting prepared, then simultaneously we'll be organising the loan application to go, okay, well, if you sell for $1 million, can you buy for $2 million? And therefore we're in step with the client and the client's timeline and the client's sale and the client's likely purchase.
Yep.
And at that point in time, we can then come up with the scenarios of saying, okay, well, do we actually need to sell your property and have an exchange contract before you commit to another one? Are we looking for a simultaneous settlement, or do you have the financial capacity to go down the path of a bridging loan, or is it going to be essential for you to go down the path of a bridging loan?
Yep.
At that point in time when, a real estate agent's given you, this is what we're going to sell it for, and this is how long it's going to take, then we can kind of make those decisions and then get the correct approvals in place that will help you seamlessly migrate from the old property to the new property.
And on that, now let's move into you're all pre-approved, your property's hit the market. Yay, we've got some people going through the door looking at my stuff. That would be a bit irky for me.
Yep.
But let's talk about at what point would you recommend a client pull the trigger and purchase their new home? As a real estate agent, Anthony, would you prefer a client has their property under offer before they go ahead and purchase, or you're pretty kind of confident that you would be selling that property anywho, it's just a matter of settlement dates?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it's very case specific again.
Yes.
As David said, some people can do different finance at different times. So it's very specific to the client in terms of how they can go through that transaction. But for me, it's really, we're getting paid by the seller. So it's a matter of getting that secure contract with market price, and as I said, when the buyer's ready, if they've got all of their finance ready and they're emotionally and financially ready to go, that's when we engage.
Yep. And on your piece, David, would you have a preference of kind of if you're selling, get a contract ready, or?
My preference for clients is always to sell, and then you know what cash you've got in your hand, right?
Yep.
And if we can sell. And I don't mind if clients sell their home at auction on Saturday and go and buy another one on Saturday afternoon, and then the sale settles in a month and the purchase settles in a month and 2 days. To me, that is perfect, right?
Yeah.
But not always does it happen that way, but that's what we try and aim for, because that is the least cost to a client. Soon as those dates don't line up like that, and we're going down the path of holding two properties at one time through bridging, then the interest cost kicks in. So I always try and see if we can get a client to negotiate the lowest cost for them, which is, selling and then buying. Because once we get into bridging, we looked at one the other day that was, a bridging finance, $2 odd million at 6%. You run into, $10,000 to $15,000 a month worth of interest costs. So, if we can avoid that, that's ideal, but doesn't always happen like that. And that's when, your finance team needs to pivot and action plan B.
And I think as Anthony had said, it is definitely always a case-by-case basis, because if you're downsizing, you're probably going to find that next property a little bit quicker than you would if you're upsizing a family home and things like that, or relocating for work. So it does come down to each case by case. But again, one of our favourite things to say is always going to be get the professional advice. Potentially don't go ahead and sign a contract to buy your new home without giving Anthony a quick call to say, hey, just making sure we're still on track to go live on this day. That's where it could be a little bit murky, but using the people around you and their tools is the best way to get this all done seamlessly.
Yeah.
So again, that early conversation is really important. If we know exactly what the client's going to do, a lot of the times we can have photos done, have the building report done, the contract in place. So the minute they go and purchase, we hit the trigger, and we're straight into to selling their home. So there's virtually no downtime. Yeah,
and we've definitely with our own clients seen Anthony and his team do this. They've purchased property on Saturday. The following week, their property is up. 3 weeks to auction. We're ready. We're going to have a simultaneous settlement. And it's seamless, but it is being prepared.
Yeah. And I think it's dealing with experts that do it a lot. Anthony, on an average year, how many properties would you sell?
In 70 to 100.
Yeah. So you do this 70 to 100 times. I do finance for properties 300 times a year. You've got a solicitor that does, probably a similar number of transactions. So your specific set of circumstances has happened 1,000 times before you, right? Yeah. So ask people, this is what I want to do. Get that advice and see how you can navigate through it the best, I think.
Yeah.
It's a big transaction and there's a lot of money involved. And I sometimes feel that being able to articulate that in a listing presentation or when you're having a chat to someone about selling can be a little bit tricky because people sometimes will shop on fee, but sometimes that cheapest fee is not the best way to go, mainly because you don't get the experience or you don't, and that can cost you a lot of money in the end. So you need to have someone that's, as Dave said, that's socially proof, that has done this many, many times and can handle that pressure and negotiate well on your behalf is really important.
And I think if you're going into wanting to sell your property and you're specifically looking at fee, when you're potentially looking at $1 million or multi-million-dollar property, that's not where your focus needs to be. You need to look at the result, tried and tested, and not try to save, a few $1,000s here or there, because even if you do save it there, chances are your solicitor might end up being more expensive or you've got adjustments. There's just costs you can't predict.
Yep.
So spend the money on the quality that you want to achieve early, because doing a second campaign 6 months later, it just doesn't work out optimally for most people.
And also going to market and not getting the sale and therefore maybe getting in or a sale in that due time and then getting into a situation for bridging finance in my situation. As we said, $15,000 a month.
It's ugly.
Wouldn't matter what an agent charged you, it's going to be cheaper than that.
Correct.
So
absolutely correct. And you're paying for experience here. And as well, like you were touching on, Anthony, that Rolodex of clients that have off-market opportunities. Imagine if you could, access one of those as a seller. You've just saved how many open homes, or preparing your property, making sure that the dog's not there on the weekend. Like, it's
marketing
life admin.
Well. You can save on marketing, which is, $4,000 or $5,000 as well.
Yeah, marketing, staging, all of those things actually. So it does become more valuable to use someone who is just simply more reputable.
Yeah.
In a positive manner, obviously, not with a bad reputation.
But again, with that too, you've got to have an agent that actually knows their stuff. So they know where the market price is for that home or very close to it.
Yeah.
That's really a very important piece of that kind of transaction.
I think it's fair to say a lot of the agents, particularly in Canberra, everyone's fantastically charismatic, but it's kind of sifting through the charisma to find out what do you know, where do the brains sit in this operation? Because at the end of the day, personality can do great at open homes, but how's it going to go on auction day? Are the expectations set? Do the buyers know where you're sitting? Or are they walking into it thinking, oh, here's my mate, he's going to do me a solid on the day? Nightmare. Okay, well, Anthony, tell us how our listeners can find you online and in person if they'd like to engage your services.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, at Heyman Partners Real Estate in Curtin. My mobile number or anywhere on allhomes or realestate.com or the major portals is where you'll see us, a lot of us. And most people start their journey there. They're looking at what's going on in the suburbs. So there's always details there, but, direct phone call or email is fine as well.
Yep.
So it's give mobile number, it's 0425 283 588 and then simply email as anthony@heymanpartners.com.au. But also obviously we're in the digital space, social media with Facebook and Instagram and things like that. So that gives you a bit of an idea of our team or my team and what we do and what the sort of properties we're selling.
Yeah, beautiful.
And for those that are a little way off, Anthony does an awesome market wrap every month. So if you follow him on Instagram or Facebook, definitely just follow him for that. Because it's really good advice and it comes out pretty much every month. I think
it does. So we do that once a month, and it's a little bit around the whole of the Australian market, but we try and tie a lot back into Canberra as well.
Yeah.
But the other thing that we do different to a lot of other people in our industry is that if we meet and we've got a long lead in time, is that we're very proactive around keeping the people informed around what's going on in their market space. So every month or every quarter, we're sending detailed information about comparable properties that are selling. And again, that's just getting that education piece into the client so that they know exactly where their home's sitting, what's going on in the market, all that kind of thing.
And I mean, if these guys are doing this for social media, you can imagine how much more knowledge is just sitting up in the brain, waiting to be tested with the market.
Yeah, correct.
Beautiful. Okay, well, thank you to our amazing listeners for joining us this week as we welcomed our very special guest, Anthony McCormack, to discuss all things selling your property. As we have touched on, if you or anyone you know is in the market to sell or potentially buy, we know Anthony's always got some great off-market opportunities. Get in touch with Anthony and his team today at Heyman Partners. A quick Google of Heyman Partners and the name Anthony will take you straight to his landing page where him and his team have all of their contact details there. If you don't get him the first time on the mobile, chances are it's because he is speaking to someone else. He won't be watching Netflix, I can assure you of that. But yeah, thank you very much, Anthony, for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks, Dave, for being here, and thank you again for listening. Nice. Cheerio.